But when the dust settled and the noise fell away and I was left with just me, I had this just horrible sense of unease of like, what's it all about? If you make the assumption that achievement, whatever achievement is going to make you happy, generally speaking, you're probably setting yourself up for failure in terms of how you're going to feel. Understandably, it's like, well, if that's the pinnacle of everything you've been working towards and you don't feel happy having achieved it, who are you? What are you? You know, what's your purpose? If that's what you've set yourself up to achieve in life and that's become your identity, then who are you? If you haven't found fulfilment or a sense of achievement in that. And I think for me, I don't feel happy, I don't feel fulfilled, I don't feel connected, I don't feel like I've got purpose. And that was the key word for me, was I genuinely didn't feel like I had a purpose. I wouldn't say that I suddenly found myself in really deep, dark depression, but I was conscious that it was different. And so I decided, look, it's chapter 5, I've got to walk down a different street, I've got to do something fundamentally different. And that was the 3rd of July 2021. That was the last day that I had a drink of alcohol. But I think anybody who is struggling with any form of difficult mental health challenges or what have you is
I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. Through sharing the stories of our guests, I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. I hope you can join us on this journey. We're recording this around, World Mental Health Days coming up, which we're looking to release the episode on. So I know you put the blog that you wrote, where does your ladder lead, which I found fascinating, and it's really interesting. Like you said, you sort of alluded to getting to that point where you've achieved all your goals, and but that euphoria moment, I guess, where you've financially wealthy, but just not feeling fulfilled. Just so keen to explore just that little bit more about, delve a little bit deeper into that mindset around that time and where you are right now in regards to fulfillment, I guess. Have you got to a place now where you feel like that, or?
I'm certainly in a place where I better understand myself, and I'm more at peace with who I am, and actually, does it matter what other people think? Actually, if you know in your own heart that that you've done your best and that you're a decent person, and it comes down to, I think, we could all spend a bit more time listening and learning to the lessons that have been learnt by other people. So over the last couple of years, listening to podcasts, I listened to Rich Roll. He's a for me, I think, just a hugely inspirational person. He interviews, or he has these podcasts with a whole range of different inspirational people, and the themes are the same. That what really matters is faith, family, friends, and work that serves other people. And if you focus your attention on those areas, then you are setting yourself up for happiness, whatever happiness looks like for different people. If you make the assumption that achievement, whatever achievement is going to make you happy, generally speaking, you're probably setting yourself up for failure in terms of how you're going to feel. I think some people call it striver's curse. It's really common for what the outside world would look at as high achievers to be thoroughly miserable. And there are loads and loads of cases of this. Probably some of them more widely known tend to be sports people who've reached the pinnacle of their sport. I can't remember the chap's name, but there's Olympic diver, not Tom Daley, who was talking on a show the other day, and he was saying how, he'd obviously trained all his early life to become great at this sport, and then he became British champion, and he wasn't satisfied, and he became European champion. He still didn't feel that he'd achieved, his goals, and then Commonwealth champion, and then eventually, world champion and Olympic champion. And he just went into absolute spiral of depression because he, understandably, it's like, well, if that's the pinnacle of everything you've been working towards, and you don't feel happy having achieved it, who are you? What are you? What's your purpose? Ben Fogle talks about it when he summited Everest. He then went through months of depression afterwards because what else is there? If that's what you've set yourself up to achieve in life, and that's become your identity, then who are you? If you haven't found fulfillment or a sense of achievement in that. And I think for me, I think I probably, certainly for a number of years, was a bit of a workaholic, certainly a perfectionist. And we didn't set, interestingly, one of the challenges I think is that we didn't set specific goals for quite a long time. And actually, when you do set specific goals, while it has, on one hand, a very positive impact because you know exactly what you're going after, and sometimes you get to that goal quicker than if you just let things sort of float along. But I don't think I'd done the work to understand what it might feel like if I actually got all my dreams. And I've said this to several people since, but if you're fortunate enough to be in a situation where you achieve financial freedom, on the road to that, the people you're most likely to be recommended to speak to are investment managers, right? So, you must go and talk to such and such; they'll help you with your money. Great. Nobody comes up and says you need to go and see a life coach. You need to go and see a therapist. You need to go and talk to somebody about who you are, what your motivations are, what you're going to do afterwards, how it's going to feel. The likelihood of imposter syndrome, all the things that are, when you start reading and you start listening, so common, incredibly common, whether people like Tom Hanks, really successful people who suffer with imposter syndrome or not having a sense of ease of who they are and what they've achieved. And that's exactly what happened to me. It took a while because COVID got in the way. So completed the deal 6th of March, lockdown 23rd of March. First 2 or 3 months was just, how do we get through this? So, all efforts were put into that. But when the dust settled and the noise fell away and I was left with just me, I had this just horrible sense of unease of, like, what's it all about? Like, so what? What next? And interestingly, I would say that in all the times where I've had poor mental health, it was very much around, I was suffering from panic attacks or I was suffering with anxiety. It was never about depression. I never felt down. Frustrated at, the fact that I was suffering from panic attacks and feeling anxious about stuff, but never felt down. And for the first time ever, I felt low. I felt like, this is pretty rubbish. I don't feel happy. I don't feel fulfilled. I don't feel connected. I don't feel like I've got purpose. And that was the key word for me, was I genuinely didn't feel like I had a purpose, which is ridiculous, right? Because at the very foundation of who I was a husband and a father. So if at the very least the only thing I ever did from then on was to be a great dad and a great husband, that's enough, right? But for some reason in my head, no, that's, there must be something more. There must be something else. And I think, ultimately it's about identity for me. So again, if you think about, famous actors or sports people or what have you, they build an identity that is entirely entrenched in the way they're perceived by the public. This is who they are. For me, everything I did was connected in some way to work. So if it was social engagements, they were nights out with friends that I worked with. They were corporate evenings with businesses that we worked with. They were golf trips with people I worked with. They were trips abroad with people I worked with. You know, it was obviously you had family holidays, but everything else in some way connected back to work. And I would say I actually grew to hate that fact, to the point where I remember, I can't remember what it, I had a Focus branded something, I can't remember what it was, in my office, and I threw it away because I was like, I don't want it. I don't want to be constantly bombarded with that is who I am, that is my persona, that is my identity. Which is a really weird feeling. A really weird feeling. And it just so happened that it coincided with I had a acute appendicitis in the June of 2020, and then an issue with reflux, which I'm sure were probably brought on by the bad eating and excessive drinking and stress that I'd had through the previous 9 months getting to that transaction. But it all happened at the same time, and it was, you know, it felt pretty debilitating. It made me question who I was and what my motivation was, and what would come next. You know, I wouldn't say that I suddenly found myself in really deep, dark depression, but I was conscious that it was different, and I'm not one to just kind of sit back and let it eat me up. So I communicated with my business partner and senior team and said, look, you know, I'm just not in a good place, and because I've not shied away from talking about my own challenges in the past, it wasn't like some shock horror. Oh my God, what's wrong with Chris? You know, it's like, oh, okay, you know, he's just not great. And so I just was able to just step back for a few months and took the opportunity to sign up to a mindfulness class, and began seeing a counsellor. And yeah, it's never an overnight success, right? These things take time, but I was able to sort of start to unpack some things that I'd never really talked about, or had never even been something that I was really aware of. I was so busy in that role of, you know, joint CEO and running the business and growing, and that I just wasn't really aware of it. And I did an 8-week mindfulness course. I then did a 12-week follow-up, and it was during that 12-week follow-up that we were doing a session. I've brought it with me because I can never remember the poem, but if it's all right with you, I will read out the poem that got read out on that day. So it's called Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters. So, chapter 1. I walk down the street, and there is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I still don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. It isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's habit. It's my fault. I know where I am. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down a different street.
Wow.
And timing is everything.
Yeah.
And earlier that week, at the weekend prior, so this was on the Wednesday, I think, that I was on this mindfulness course where I read out that poem. On the prior weekend, I'd been at an amazing event, and it had been a long weekend of having an amazing time with some great people, but lots of alcohol involved. And what should have been an incredible fun weekend and almost a once-in-a-lifetime experience resulted in me having the most horrendous hangover on the Sunday, and then an awful bout of anxiety on the Sunday evening, all day Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, just horrendous. All the demons come flooding in, because for me, a hangover has very similar sensations and feelings to anxiety. So come the Wednesday, I'm having this mindfulness session, and he reads out the poem, and I was listening to this poem, and it just spoke to me about my relationship with alcohol. Now, I'd been journaling, and again, I'd only started journaling because of counselling sessions and listening to mindfulness and various podcasts. But a combination of me having journaled for probably 4 or 5 months up until that point, and being able to look back at trends of behaviour and how I was feeling on a day-to-day basis, and then listening to this poem, I thought to myself, what on earth am I doing? Time and time again, with alcohol, where alcohol was concerned, I was walking down this street, knowing exactly where I was, doing exactly the same thing, and then paying the consequences and suffering for days afterwards. And I sat there and I thought to myself, what am I doing? And I've tried, for me, chapter 4 means, which is what lots of people do, I know what I'll do. I'll drink less. I won't drink on a weeknight. I'll only drink at the weekends. But a relationship with alcohol, this wasn't as though I was an alcoholic, but my relationship with alcohol was such that when we did have a weekend where we had some event going on, like my 40th birthday, I remember, again, this sort of event where it was fantastic, but my God, I felt awful for 2 or 3 days afterwards. Sure. And it just takes the enjoyment out of it, because your memory is somewhat tainted. Obviously, you're not fully present during the actual event. So I've tried chapter 4 several times, which is this controlled, okay, I'm stepping around the hole, right? But actually, every now and then, you still fall in. And I decided, look, it's chapter 5. I've got to walk down a different street. I've got to do something fundamentally different. And that was the 3rd of July, 2021. That was the last day that I had a drink of alcohol. And
you haven't had a drink since?
Haven't had a drink since. Now, I'm very conscious not to say I'm teetotal. I will never drink again. Yeah. I'm not saying that. But I haven't had any sort of severe anxiety since. Very openly, I'm 3 weeks since I had my last tablet, which I take for anxiety. So I'm a little bit vulnerable and, kind of like just a bit sensitive at the moment in terms of being. But that self-awareness and that time that I've taken through mindfulness courses, through counselling, through life coaching, and through listening to hours and hours and hours of podcasts, means that I just have tools that I didn't have available to me before, and I'm not fighting an uphill battle where every few weeks I'm suffering 2 or 3 days with a bad anxiety because I've had a few drinks. So some people will go, oh well, isn't it boring? You're not able to have a drink, and for some people they need alcohol to take away that sort of nervousness in a social situation, and I'm very lucky that I don't have that because of the job I have done and all that over the years. That's something that's quite natural to me anyway. But I would implore people. It doesn't necessarily mean that people have to stop drinking, but I think anybody who is struggling with any form of difficult mental health challenges or what have you, is just invest the time in you. And that can be in all sorts of ways, but I think everyone will find their own source of comfort, their own learning, and